So today, obviously, we know is the 20th of February, and MDs across the world are celebrating Muslim Day. Hazul mentioned this in his sermon as well, but also on Al-Hakam, on Hazul's latest guidance with regards to Hazrat Muslim Maud. He says that there are many aspects of this prophecy and the youth should be introduced to all of them. However, the aspect that can be more appealing for the modern mind is that he shall be full of knowledge, spiritual and secular. So how can an average khadim relate to this guidance?
So first of all, it's essential that those Khuddam who haven't read this piece on Al-Hakam, which is the latest guidance from Hazur, which he gave to Asif Basit Saab, who is...
We should put the link in the description. Sorry, so hopefully you can find the link in the description and then go to Al-Hakam's website and read the full guidance.
Yeah, right, exactly. So this was given to Asif Basit Saab, and this is, Hazur basically speaks about, and it's true as well, especially for us living in the West. He said that the elements of, how Hazrat Muslim Maud had such deep knowledge without having a proper education of the world around him, of all the sciences. We can discuss atheism as well. He used to, we'll come back to that later as well if you want, Usman Saab. And basically, Hazur saying that Hazrat Muslim Maud, he had this side to him where he was deeply, deeply informed of all the world around him. Especially that was a time during the colonial era. The sciences were progressing as well. So a lot of Khuddam will be in university, college, even secondary school, or even, working somewhere. But you always have these topics, the secular topics, politics, science, academia, and people discuss them. But once you realize that Hazrat Muslim Maud had a really deep understanding of things, and he would be invited to different places to talk about different aspects like politics or even atheism, these kind of things. You begin to realize that, Hazrat Muslim Maud was actually something very, very different, especially during his time.
You know what's amazing as well, and in yesterday's Hazul sermon, Hazul mentioned we presented like a glimpse of the services from Hazrat Muslim Maud's life from the age of 18 to 35, and it made me kind of, it's almost goosebumps. You get goosebumps thinking, wow, actually, that's the time that he was serving, not just as a Khalifa. This was prior to him being a Khalifa and him being a Khalifa, but it was during his Khuddam days. He was a Khadim at that time.
Literally.
Like Hazul mentioned,
Hazul mentioned he was only just 19, where he was writing these profound articles about religion, about how to get close to God, the need for religion, all these kind of things. And, once you start reading up on it, and, we can even talk about some of the books he wrote, you realize that Hazrat Muslim Maud's writings, even today, are really, really relevant. Especially, us living in the West, most of our friends are being atheists, people questioning Islam, questioning religion. So once you start reading the books of Hazrat Muslim Maud, you kind of, realize that we've got a lot of knowledge which we can benefit from.
I think one thing I learned from studying Hazrat Muslim Maud's life is that maturity is not determined by age. And I think his life is evident by that. It's just your decision making, because especially in the West, you'll see it, or not just in the West, maybe everywhere in the world, that Khuddam might think that, you know what, I have this certain period in my time where I can experiment and have fun, knowing that I'm doing something wrong. And then when I get older, I'll be all right. And I think Hazrat Muslim Maud's life is an example of how actually your decision making is what's key. And if even regardless of how old you are, once you know the difference between right and wrong. And so, for example, Azul mentioned that he delivered I think at the age of 17 or 18, a speech on the unity of God. And he goes, it was amazing to see that's how someone so young has understood this topic, and not just understood it, but made other people to understand it. And secondly, I was going to say, and rather move the conversation a bit further to history, because especially in this day and age, we're all about here and right now. We don't really want to know about what's going to happen tomorrow or what's happened in the past. We're just worried about what's in front of us. Why is it important for us to study the history of our Jamaat and know the history, or in this case, for example, regarding as a Muslim and this prophecy?
I think one thing which would be really helpful for all Khuddam, I think, is that you get, especially when you're going through university or just your Sunni, Shia, whatever Muslim friends, they label Ahmadis now, especially in the UK, as they're like, you're non-Muslim, you guys are kind of irrelevant, you've been labeled as non-Muslim as well.
Yeah, we don't matter basically.
Exactly, right? But what they forget, and especially when Khuddam read the history and look at what Hazrat Muslim did, what our Jamaat did, they'll realize that the Jamaat, especially during Hazrat Muslim era, was fundamental for the Muslim cause in India, especially when the partition happened as well, for the Muslim cause in Palestine, for the Muslim cause in Kashmir. And Hazrat Muslim was looked up as an authority. He was invited by Muslim scholars to deliver speeches, his books. They had a lot of respect in the world of academia, and even his political understanding of things. For example, even when Britain had, were basically subjugating Muslim nations in the Arab lands, Hazrat Muslim was warning the Arab lands. He was basically telling them how the colonial power, i.e., Britain, are subjugating them. And once you start reading it, you realize that Ahmadiyyat was very, very relevant for Muslims at that time, for the wider Muslim cause. And once you're equipped with this knowledge and you know the history and you know what Hazrat Muslim did for the world of Islam, just from the world of Islam aspect, I'm saying, you can respond to your friends that, hang on a minute, you guys, your own scholars or your own leaders had huge amounts of respect. And even the formation, for example, of Pakistan, a lot of that was because of the Jamaat and, of course, Hazrat Muslim Maud's guidance. So I think it's once you start reading the history, you have this level of through Allah's grace, you have this level of confidence with speaking with other people, and it's confidence in your own belief as well, but also when you're speaking with others.
I think one thing history also allows you to do is to relate. So, for example, I mean, if you study religion, suffering is a core theme that all prophets have gone through, all kind of true nations have gone through. So, unless you don't know of that suffering that the previous kind of righteous people and the prophets have gone through, your suffering just feels like such a big burden. And I think once you study history and you realize that actually what we're going through is such a minor thing compared to what previous nations and Jamaats and prophets went through, that's really important as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like, during the era of Hazrat Muslim, this is a very long time period. The Jamaat went through all sorts. Partition happened as well. There was the Ahrar movement. And, like, we talk about Tehreek Jadid a lot. We talk about the Jamaat spreading all across the world. Today, we see it everywhere, right? We have to remember that the fundamentals for Tehreek Jadid, Waqf Jadid, they were actually started all by Hazrat Muslim. So if we're here in the West, we've got Jamaat all over the world. That's because of the initiatives which Hazrat Muslim had started.
You know what's amazing I was thinking about this is that, again, I say to relate to things, because only when you relate to them can you really understand the beauty behind them. Is that, can you imagine like moving house or moving areas? It's such a big thing, but nowadays we still know that, okay, financially we're okay, and where we're moving to, there's a Jamaat there. Think about when Hazrat Muslim moved to Rabwa. Like he moved countries, not just with his family, but with his entire spiritual family as well. The whole Jamaat moved with him.
Exactly.
To the unknown. We didn't know where we're going. We're just following our Khalifa. And I think looking at pictures of Rabwa then and Rabwa now, and even Qadian, if you look at pictures of Qadian in the time of the Prophet Muhammad Islam and Qadian now, those pictures kind of speak 1,000 words in themselves, in the sense that that picture, the comparison of the two is a sign of the truthfulness and how God actually supported the Jamaat at that time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even you spoke about, it's like you're moving. Hazrat Muslim described it. He said that I wasn't just moving one plant. So anyone who knows a bit of gardening, they know that moving a plant is really difficult. I don't know how many people would, but he said, I'm not just moving one plant, I'm moving a whole garden
Yeah.
to another place. And that place, of course, Rabba was barren as well. But one thing I do want to talk about, Swan, is Hazrat Muslim Maud's, profound understanding of the tide of atheism, which was
Yeah.
sweeping across Muslim youth at the time.
Which is similar now as well, to be fair.
Exactly, right? Like right now, people who are away from religion, it's at its peak, even in Muslim countries.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because when Hazrat Muslim Maud, he was in his early 20s, he went to Mecca. And before that, he did like a whole tour of India. He went to Egypt. He went to Mecca. And he was saying basically, when I was going on my way to Mecca, I met a bunch of young Muslims and they were going to England for their studies. And there were a few lawyers as well who were going to become barristers and things. And basically, I had a discussion with them and I found out they were atheists and they were hardcore atheists. They were totally against religion. Of course, they were Muslims before, but they didn't believe in Islam anymore. And basically, as a Muslim, I had a conversation with them. And by because obviously the ship journeys take months, then they loved it. They would
Yeah.
in their free time sit with him, discuss religion, and became really, really interested. So this is basically the start in his early 20s where he realized a lot of Muslims in India are becoming atheists. This is the younger generation. So throughout his life, when you read his books, you realize how well he answered the question of atheism, but not just that, but how he gave confidence to Muslim youth about Islam, right? Because at that time they were questioning Islam, like because you have the Western colonial powers there as well. There was all this interchanging going on between education in England and back in India, and Muslims were like, simple things, for example, drinking or polygamy or divorce, all these kind of things. Muslims were like on the back foot because the West would be like, these are such backwards teachings. But Hazrat Muslim answered them amazingly, and it's all in the literature. It's all there available for the Khuddam to read.
Yeah, no, I think like we said before, we'll put the link of
Yeah.
the Al-Hakam article of the Hazur's latest guidance in the description. So if you haven't read it, please do go and read it. And I mean, there's so much content online. I was actually just watching last year's the documentary, the 3-part documentary that was released. I think where Mudabbar goes on like a different journey. And I was actually watching when being born and raised in this country. Whenever you hear that a Khalifa has done something in England. So the first time Hazur came to England, and he came for that conference in 1924. It's actually an amazing journey, and I think that's the second episode of the series. But yeah, there's loads of content online. We'll put some in the description. Please do go check it out.
Even if you go to the Al-Hakam website, alhakam.org, I got to get it in there. There's loads of articles.
Sorry, what I was going to ask actually, who was that? I saw one of the articles is a glimpse from a life devotee.
Yeah.
You've not said who it is. Is that because the person not want to reveal himself?
Yeah, I think it's towards that. Yeah.
Not because I was just trying to see who it was, because that's really interesting actually.
Yeah, it's a really good read. I mean, I there's two actually. There's Hazrat Muslim son-in-law, and there's also a life devotee. I recommend both of them especially. And there's the life devotee one is a bit more detailed, a bit longer, but both are just amazing to read. And you kind of realize, they say something really interesting. They say, because there's some recordings of Hazrat Muslim out there, right?
Yeah.
So they say I think it's the life devotee one. He says I've heard them, but he's like it doesn't come close to how he spoke and how he was and his aura and his his power in his voice. So I highly recommend Khuddam to read that because he was a khadim himself at that time.
Yep.
And he speaks about wanting to defend Hazrat Muslim when he was attacked, and basically it's a really, really good account. So I highly recommend that.